From aggregate qualifying to standing restarts, Formula One has had its fair share of rule introductions that didn't last very long. So let's talk about the times that F1 managed to look stupid by introducing and then getting rid of new rules. Starting with the highly controversial rule about double points. Do you guys remember this rule? It came out back in the 2014 season. You see, it was widely condoned by drivers and fans alike. People were definitely not happy with it. Even so, it stayed within the regulations. In fact, the rule ended up getting scrapped after a major incident. Want to know more? Think back to Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg's head-to-head competition for the driver's title. Now, technically, the double points contributed massively to the final result. But in reality, Rosberg managed to pick up a problem and Hamilton got away with an easy win. This major blip was enough of a scandal to make the F1 change their minds. This incident became the reason why the double points rule was canned so quickly after it was introduced. If only this was the only time they'd done something like this, that would have been great. But it's not. If you thought that this was dumb enough, wait till you hear the next one. I'm talking about the bizarre rule against tire changes during pit stops. That's right, this rule came about from the 2005 season. It even sounds absurd, right? The rule said that you could only refuel during pit stops, no tire changes. Weirdly, in today's regulation, it's the complete opposite of this now. Yeah, that doesn't really compute.
So there he was again, and then the team says to me it's critical now to pass, critical for the championship.
Well, if you look at the rules today, you'll see that tire changing is allowed, but refueling actually isn't. Back in the day, the tires were made to last the entire race. You could only change them without a penalty in really specific cases. For example, you had a puncture, you had bad flat spots, or if the weather conditions changed. Can you imagine how rare these exceptions must be? So basically, it was practically impossible to change the tires then. You can probably guess why this rule didn't go down all that well. It didn't exactly help with the on-track action either. This is the reason why we never saw it again after the 2005 season ended. I'm glad F1 decided against this absurdity. It does sound like a very silly rule after all.
Consistently at 2 seconds, you have to add some time to that, so it will bring them towards the bulk of the rest of the grid.
I guess. Well, so is this next rule. The most recent rule to get scrapped, which shamed F1, is actually about elimination qualifying. I included other qualifying formats in this list as well, but this one is special because this is the most recent one to be discarded. If you recall, this system of elimination-style qualification was first introduced at the start of the 2016 F1 season. So unpopular was this rule that it literally only lasted 2 races. How embarrassing is that? This rule clearly didn't work out for the drivers and for F1. In fact, right after the race, the series ended up reverting back to the old format. Why did this happen? The reason is obvious. Because of this strange rule, a total of 7 drivers got knocked out every 90 seconds in the first 2 sessions. Only 8 then took part in Q3. These would again end up eliminated from pole contention after 90 seconds. Finally, you were left with only 2 drivers who would battle for P1. This sucked pretty hard. Do you think you would have enjoyed watching a race like this? I guess there is such a thing as too much experimentation. Strangely enough though, F1 kept the system around for a second race after the disaster in the first. But they soon saw sense. After scrapping the rule, things reverted back, to all of our relief. Thank goodness.
It's a good day for Ferrari, a good day for the team, great day for Charles, a great opportunity tomorrow, so I think we need to be happy.
I'm not done yet, folks. This next one is a radio rule which pretty much amounted to driver coaching. Apparently, tweaks were made to try to stop this, hoping to put the driver back into control, So yes, a number of restrictions were brought in. These were again altered just ahead of 2016's season so that strategy messages could still be communicated. You'd think that that would solve matters. Instead, things got much more complicated. Why, you ask? Well, the FIA clamped down on radio rules even more so. This was after Nico Rosberg got penalized for some messages during the British GP. From what I understand, this whole issue is about whether drivers could radio with problems and the team could then guide them on how to resolve them. What are your thoughts? Is this really such a big deal? Apparently, the FIA made a decision to take these rules even further. Now the drivers had to pit if they wanted to talk about these kinds of issues over the team radio. Sounds like a mess, right? That's exactly why the criticism over the rules grew so much that the entire ban was scrapped altogether. I'm glad it was, because this was getting far too complex to navigate. This next rule was another decision that F1 came to regret almost immediately.
Very painful, you know, you're going to spend a couple of laps which are already seconds, and yeah, that can hurt quite a bit into your race time.
Actually, it was about aggregate qualifying. I did warn you guys that there was another qualifying format in my list. You see, AQ is about 2 sessions taking place with 1 lap per driver from each segment. Now, if the first driver would be low on fuel, the driver in the second segment would be on race fuel. Finally, the lap times were added up to figure out the grid. This was also a silly rule, because it just didn't produce a particularly good spectacle. What's a sport if not entertaining for its viewers, right? In fact, F1 realized this so quickly that it binned the rule just 6 races into the 2005 season. But enough about formats. This ban may not have completely changed, but it's definitely gotten less strict. I'm talking about the helmet design change ban. Right before the start of the season, this rule imposing a strict ban on drivers modifying their helmet designs was introduced. I'll be honest, I was never really a fan of this idea. I mean, it's obviously a good idea to help fans recognize drivers through their helmet designs. But my reasons were different. You see, it's just plain cool to be able to see creative and fun designs on helmets. Makes the sport more interesting. Thankfully, the ban was relaxed a bit for 2016.
Days ago to Q3 2 days later, I must say I'm really happy. I didn't feel so good this morning.
The design just needs to be substantially in the same livery now. Plus, the new rule says that each driver has 1 race per season to use a special and different helmet design. All in all, I'd say that this has been a good step ahead. And I'll end this list with an interesting one. This rule about standing restarts was actually binned before it was even introduced. So for the 2015 season, standing restarts looked pretty set and ready to be brought in. Things didn't quite go to plan though. That's right, even though it was agreed to introduce them in 2014. Later on, the idea was ditched into the failed F1 rules bin. The new season started and we never got to see the standing restarts rule in action. I'm not so sure if this was a good or a bad thing. What I do know is that every time F1 goes back and forth on the rules like this, well, it comes off as quite unprofessional. In fact, as you saw, some of them have been quite silly. Can you think of any other bizarre rules that were ditched soon after being introduced? And these, folks, were some rules that were scrapped pretty quickly and that made F1 look stupid. See you in the next video.